If you're staring at rusty water coming out of your faucet every morning, or you've patched the same copper line for the third time this year, and you're finally ready to say, enough is enough, then you've probably started looking into a full repipe. And the second you start researching, one word keeps showing up everywhere: PX. Now here's where most homeowners get themselves into trouble. They head straight to the hardware store, grab a cart full of tubing and fittings, and start ripping into walls without understanding what they're actually working with. I don't want that to be you. In this video, I'm going to give you the complete rundown on everything you need to understand before you commit to a PEX repipe. The types of tubing, the connection methods, the real-world costs, the limitations that the salespeople won't mention, and the code requirements you cannot afford to ignore. Stick around to the end, because I've got a bonus tip about fitting selection that could save you from a callback nightmare years down the road. All right, let's get into this. Repiping your house in PEX is honestly one of the best investments you can make in an older home. I'll tell you, I wish this stuff had been around when I bought my 1958 ranch, because it would have saved me years of chasing leaks through plaster walls. The good news is that a PEX repipe is well within reach for a homeowner who takes the time to learn the material and plan the job properly. So let's start right at the beginning and talk about what PEX actually is. PEX stands for cross-linked polyethylene. I know that sounds like something you'd hear in a college chemistry class, but the concept is simple. It's a flexible plastic tubing where the molecular chains have been bonded together or cross-linked in a way that makes the material extremely strong and durable under pressure. The easiest way I can describe it is this. Regular polyethylene, the stuff plastic bags are made from, is soft and weak. But once you cross-link those molecules, you get something closer to a tough, flexible hose that can handle both hot and cold water at real household pressures for decades without breaking down. What makes PEX special for repiping is that flexibility. Unlike copper or galvanized steel, which are rigid and require a fitting at every single change of direction, PEX bends. You can sweep it around corners, run it in long, continuous lengths from your water heater all the way to a bathroom on the other side of the house, and dramatically reduce the number of fittings in your system. Every fitting you eliminate is one less potential leak point hiding inside a wall. That matters more than most people realize. Beyond the flexibility, PEX brings three other major advantages to the table. First, it doesn't corrode. If you've ever dealt with galvanized pipes that slowly rust shut from the inside, or copper lines that develop pinhole leaks in areas with aggressive water, PEX eliminates both of those problems entirely. Second, it handles freezing better than any rigid pipe material. PEX can expand somewhat when water freezes inside it and then return to its original shape when things thaw out. Now let me be clear, it is not freeze-proof, and I don't want anyone thinking they can leave it exposed in an unheated space without insulation. But it's far more forgiving than copper, which will split wide open the second ice forms inside it. Third, it's significantly cheaper than copper, both the material itself and the labor to install it, which brings the total cost of a repipe down considerably. Now let's get into something that trips up a lot of homeowners right out of the gate. When you walk into a supply house or browse online, you're going to see three designations: PEX-A, PEX-B, and PEX-C. I need you to hear this clearly. Those letters are not grades. PEX-A is not better than PEX-B, the way grade A beef is better than grade B. The letters simply tell you which manufacturing process was used to cross-link the polyethylene, and each process gives the tubing slightly different physical characteristics. PEX-A is manufactured using the Engel method, which cross-links the material before it's formed into tubing. The result is the most uniformly cross-linked and most flexible version of PEX available. If you've ever worked in a crawl space on your hands and knees trying to route tubing around ductwork and floor joists, you'll appreciate how much easier the extra flexibility makes tight turns and awkward angles. PEX-A also has a unique property called thermal memory. If you accidentally kink the tubing, and believe me, it happens to everyone sooner or later, you can aim a heat gun at the kinked spot for about 30 seconds, and the tubing will relax right back to its original round shape. That's a genuine advantage on a big job where you're handling hundreds of feet of tubing. PEX-A pairs exclusively with expansion-style fittings, which I'll explain shortly, and those fittings maintain the full internal diameter of the tubing, so your water flow stays unrestricted. The trade-off is price. PEX-A costs more per foot than PEX-B, and the expansion tooling is a bigger upfront investment. PEX-B is manufactured using what's called a silane method, where the cross-linking happens after the tubing is formed. It's slightly stiffer than PEX-A, but it's a perfectly reliable, well-proven tubing that millions of homes are plumbed with right now. It's the most widely available type, and it's cheaper per foot, which makes a real difference when you're buying 300 or 400 feet for a whole house repipe. PEX-B works with crimp ring and clamp ring fittings, both of which are affordable and widely stocked. The downside compared to PEX-A is that if you kink PEX-B, the heat gun trick won't work. You'll need to cut out that damaged section and splice in a coupling fitting. It's not a deal breaker by any stretch, but it's something to know going in. PEX-C uses an electron beam process for cross-linking. It falls between A and B in terms of flexibility and is honestly the least common of the three. Most supply houses carry limited PEX-C inventory, and most plumbers I know don't reach for it. For practical purposes, your decision is really between PEX-A and PEX-B, and that decision hinges almost entirely on which connection method you want to use. This is the section I want you to pay the closest attention to, because the connection method you choose dictates your entire tool investment, your fitting inventory, and how every single joint in your system gets made. There are 4 methods out there, and each one deserves an honest look. Expansion fittings are the standard connection for PEX-A. The brand you'll encounter most often is homeowner, though the method itself isn't proprietary. Here's how it works. You slide a reinforced expansion ring over the end of the tubing. Then you insert an expansion tool into the tubing end and pull the trigger several times, which stretches both the ring and the tubing outward. While everything is still expanded, you push the fitting insert into the tubing. Over the next 60 to 90 seconds, the tubing and ring shrink back to their original dimensions and clamp down onto that fitting with tremendous force. The connection actually gets stronger over time as the material continues to recover. The major advantage of expansion fittings is that the fitting insert has a full-bore interior, meaning it doesn't narrow the flow path inside the tubing. On a half-inch line feeding a single fixture, that unrestricted flow can make a noticeable difference in water pressure. The expansion tool is your biggest cost here, running anywhere from $150 for a manual version up to $350 or more for a quality battery-powered model. Crimp rings are the most established PEX connection method and the one most plumbers learned on. You slide a copper crimp ring over the tubing, push the brass or polymer fitting insert into the tubing end, position the ring over the fitting barbs, and use a crimp tool to compress the ring tightly around everything. The crimp tool has specific jaw sizes, so you'll need the right jaws for each tubing diameter you're working with. A half-inch jaw and a 3/4-inch jaw will cover 90% of residential work. The tool itself runs about $50 to $100, and fittings are cheap, generally $1 to $3 each. The trade-off is that insert-style fittings do reduce the internal diameter of the tubing at every connection point. On 3/4-inch trunk lines, the restriction is minimal. On half-inch branch lines, it's more noticeable, though still acceptable for most residential applications. Clamp rings, which a lot of folks in the trade call cinch rings, are stainless steel bands with a small raised ear tab. You position the ring, insert the fitting, and use a cinch tool to compress that ear tab, which draws the ring tight. The beauty of this method is simplicity. One single cinch tool handles every tubing size, from 3/8 inch all the way up to 1 inch. You don't need to swap jaws or carry multiple tools. The cinch tool runs about $50 to $70, making it the most budget-friendly entry point for a homeowner doing their first PEX project. Push-fit connectors are the fourth option, and I'll give you my honest take on these. They're engineered well. They hold pressure. They pass code in most jurisdictions. But here's the thing. I don't use them behind walls. I don't install them in places I can't see or reach. A push-fit connector under a sink cabinet where I can inspect it once a year and grab it if something ever goes wrong, that's fine. But buried inside a wall cavity, where the only way to get to it is to tear out drywall, that's not where I want a push-fit connection sitting for the next 30 years. For a full repipe, choose expansion, crimp, or clamp, and don't look back. By the way, if you're finding this advice helpful, do me a small favor and hit that subscribe button down below. I put out new videos like this one every week, walking you through repairs that'll save you a small fortune in plumber bills. Subscribing is free, and it's the best way to make sure you don't miss the next one. All right, let's continue. Now I need to talk to you about the things PEX can't do, because every material has weak spots, and PEX is no different. If somebody tries to sell you on PEX as a miracle product with zero drawbacks, walk away from that conversation. The biggest limitation is ultraviolet sensitivity. Sunlight degrades PEX tubing, and it doesn't take long. Even 30 days of direct UV exposure can compromise the structural integrity enough to create a failure point later. That means PEX never gets installed outdoors. It never runs along an exterior wall where sunlight hits it. And if you buy your tubing and store it in the garage near a window for a few months before your project, keep it in the box or throw a tarp over it. Once the tubing is installed inside walls, under floors, or in a dark attic, UV is a non-issue. Second limitation is rodent vulnerability. Mice and rats will chew through PEX. I've seen it twice in 40 years, and both times the homeowner had a known pest problem they hadn't addressed. If your crawl space or attic has unwanted residents, handle that before you run a single foot of new tubing. Third, PEX cannot connect directly to high-heat appliances. Most building codes require a minimum of 18 inches of metallic pipe, usually copper, between a gas water heater and the point where PEX begins. Some water heater manufacturers specify even greater distances, so always read the installation manual for your specific unit. And PEX is never used for gas supply lines. Not sometimes, not with special fittings. Never. Fourth, fitting chemistry matters. Years ago, the industry had real problems with standard brass insert fittings failing in homes with aggressive water chemistry. The zinc in the brass would break down through a process called dezincification, and fittings would crack and leak. The industry has largely corrected this with dezincification-resistant brass alloys and polymer fittings. But if you have well water, or water that's known to be acidic or mineral-heavy, pay close attention to what your fittings are made of. This ties directly into my bonus tip, so keep that in the back of your mind. Let's talk money, because I know that's driving a lot of your decision-making, and it should. A professional whole-house PEX repipe on a standard 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home typically runs between $4,000 and $8,000. That includes material, labor, and usually the permit and inspection. A comparable copper repipe on the same house runs $8,000 to $15,000, sometimes more depending on your area. That's a massive difference, and it's the primary reason PEX has become the dominant residential piping material in the country. If you're doing the work yourself, material costs are remarkably affordable. PEX-B tubing runs about 30 to 50 cents per foot. PEX-A runs roughly 50 to 75 cents per foot. Fittings average $1 to $4 each, depending on type and size. Your tool investment is $50 to $200 for crimp or clamp, higher for expansion. The hidden cost that catches people off guard is wall access. If your home is mid-renovation with open stud bays, Running PEX is fast and straightforward. If your walls are finished, you're looking at cutting access holes, fishing tubing through closed cavities, and then patching and painting drywall afterward. Budget for that reality. Before you make your first cut, understand your local code requirements. PEX is accepted by nearly every building code in the country, but local jurisdictions can and do add their own requirements. Some specify which types of PEX are approved. Some mandate certain connection methods. Almost all require a permit for a whole house repipe, and that permit triggers an inspection. Do not skip the permit. A $75 to $200 permit protects you legally and protects the next person who buys your house. I've seen unpermitted plumbing work kill real estate deals, and it always costs more to fix after the fact than the permit would have cost up front. Support your tubing properly. Code typically requires hangers or clips every 32 inches on horizontal runs and every 4 to 6 feet on vertical runs. Use plastic or coated hangers designed for PEX. Never use bare metal straps that can dig into the tubing over time. And install nail plates wherever PEX passes through a stud or joist. Those little metal plates cost about 50 cents each, and they're the only thing protecting your water line from a misplaced drywall screw or finish nail. Let me walk you through the most common mistakes I see, because avoiding these will save you enormous headaches. Never close up walls without pressure testing first. Charge the entire system with air to about 80 pounds per square inch and let it sit for a minimum of 2 hours. Watch that gauge. If it holds steady, you're good to drywall. If it drops even a pound or two, you have a leak somewhere, and finding it with the framing exposed is infinitely easier than finding it behind finished walls. Don't route PEX near concentrated heat sources. Keep it away from furnace flues, boiler vents, recessed light canisters, and anything else that throws serious heat. The maximum continuous service temperature for PEX is around 200 degrees Fahrenheit, but you should never design your system to run anywhere close to that limit. Account for thermal movement. PEX expands and contracts with temperature changes more than copper does. Long, straight runs without any slack will rub against framing and create annoying ticking or creaking sounds every time the hot water flows. Build gentle curves or service loops into your longer runs to absorb that movement quietly. Commit to one connection system for the entire house. Don't crimp on one floor and expand on another. Consistency means one tool, one fitting type, one technique that you master thoroughly, and clarity for anyone who ever needs to service the system after you. Seriously consider a manifold layout. A home-run manifold system routes individual lines from a central manifold to each fixture in the house. It uses more tubing, yes, but it dramatically reduces the number of fittings buried inside walls and gives you individual shutoff control at one accessible location. For a whole house repipe, it's the professional approach, and it's absolutely achievable for a homeowner. All right, here's that bonus tip I mentioned at the top, and this one matters more than most people realize. When you're selecting fittings for your repipe, choose polymer over brass. The polymer fittings used in PEX systems are made from a material called polyphenol sulfone, which the industry abbreviates as PPSU. These fittings are completely inert. They don't care what your water chemistry looks like. They can't corrode, they can't desincify, and they deliver the same flow characteristics as brass. The price difference is small, roughly 50 cents to $1 more per fitting. On a whole house repipe with 50 or 60 connections, you're spending maybe $30 to $50 extra total. For that modest amount, you've permanently eliminated the single failure mode that caused all those class action lawsuits and gave PEX a black eye 15 years ago. I switched to polymer fittings on my own house, and I recommend them to every homeowner I talk to. It's one of those decisions that costs almost nothing today and pays you back with decades of zero worry. My Uncle Ray had a saying that I think about every time I make a material choice on a job. Do it once, do it right. Spending an extra $30 on fittings you'll never have to think about again is about as right as it gets. That's how my Uncle Ray taught me, and that's how I'm teaching you. Before you go, if you got something out of this video, do me one last favor and hit that subscribe button. I put out new videos every week covering real-world plumbing repairs, money-saving tips, and the kind of know-how that takes years to pick up on the job. Subscribing costs you nothing, and it makes sure these videos show up in your feed when you need them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.